All right, y'all, we're tuning into another episode of Bankedoutt Radio Show, and I have a special guest, as you see. We have Miss Aisha, Aisha Ellen, Mr. Johnny, and Miss Penny. Miss Ellen is a part of LifeLink. LifeLink, I guess, from me reading the description, nonprofit. It helps with organ donations.
Yes. We
Correct.
Facilitate the organ donation. Facilitate the organ donation transplantation process.
So for all my viewers out there, give us a little background of what got you into this particular space, and then we'll get into Johnny's and Penny's story.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because believe it or not, I had no clue who LifeLink was.
Mm-hmm.
My background comes from corporate America.
Okay.
I've worked for companies like Coca-Cola, McLean, grocery distributors. I've always been in the consumer product good industry in sales and account management. But I always wanted to make the transition into nonprofit because my master's is in public administration.
Okay.
But I was not looking for LifeLink. LifeLink actually found me, and I wasn't familiar with LifeLink at all. I mean, I knew about, people being registered organ donors, but I didn't really think beyond, that as far as what all the process consists of. But I was recruited by via LinkedIn by the HR recruiter. And,
I realized people still use like LinkedIn like that.
Yeah, well, and I didn't either, but this was about 2 years ago, so over 2 years ago now. And but yeah, that's how I came about as far as with LifeLink, and have been with them now for a little over 2 years as an education specialist.
Okay, and I remember when we was talking on the phone, you were giving me a rundown of like the stats and how organ donation. Well, it seems like there's a problem in our community as far as being recipients.
Not as far as being recipients. Well, the problem with that is there are too many of us that's on the waiting list.
Yeah, well, so supply and demand type of situation.
Yeah, supply and demand, exactly. The waiting list in Georgia consists of currently over 5,000 people.
Wow.
And out of that 5,000, 63% are African American. But when it comes to the, donor registration side or the donor side, our numbers fall short. So we have the highest need as far as individuals who are waiting for life-saving transplants. But when it comes to being registered organ donors, because of a lot of fears and misconceptions about organ donation, lots of times we tend not to register to be donors.
So let's get into that a little bit because I'm an organ donor. Like I signed up when I got my license and all that. So I'm like, once I die, I'm like, sure, if there's anything healthy, take it.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's how I look at it. I'm like, I'm not taking it with me or anything. So what are some of those misconceptions so we can go ahead and dispel that? Because I think, that's where a lot of education, that's what we use it for. And we need to go ahead and dispel all that because we just hear stuff growing up.
Yeah. Or we read stuff on the internet, or we see scary movies, and we take fiction to be factual, and it's not. But a lot of it begins, and I'll be honest, some of it I do understand. The mistrust of the healthcare system in America. We know the history. I don't have to go through that. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
But that mistrust of the healthcare system causes people to believe that if they are a registered organ donor, if they're in an accident, rushed to the emergency room, that the medical personnel won't try to save them. And I mean, and that's actually, people truly believe that. And that's maybe not just an African American thing. I've heard that across all ethnicities, those who are, either opposed to or not registered organ donors, that they feel that if I'm a registered donor, if I ever get in a situation where I need to be saved, that, they won't try to save me because they want my organs. And that's furthest from the truth. I always tell people, first of all, the healthcare system makes money off of sick people, not dead people. Trust and believe.
Exactly.
I mean, so, and doctors, nurses, whatever, the medical staff, they do whatever they can to be able to save a person. And organ donation is not even considered until all taking measures have been made.
Exactly. It's like the last thing.
Exactly. And
prevent the death, and then if it happens, then,
Exactly. And in actuality, the hospitals actually have nothing to do with the organ donation transplantation process. So how it works is, like, for example, LifeLink, we're an organ procurement organization, or OPO. We're one of 58 OPOs in the United States. For Georgia, we cover the state of Georgia, but we also cover like 15 counties in Florida, and we also have Puerto Rico. So you have LifeLink Foundation, then you have LifeLink of Georgia, LifeLink of Florida, and LifeLink of Puerto Rico. Some states, like Florida, for example, has multiple OPOs. LifeLink has 15 counties in Florida, and then it's like 2 other OPOs, I believe, in Florida. So about 3 in Florida. So most states have like 2 to 3, but Georgia is just LifeLink. So in a case where, let's just say, using an example, Navicent. Let's say if there's a case right now, even as we speak, where someone has died from a brain death related injury or illness, and I'll go more in detail about that later, because that plays a huge part as far as who's actually able to be an organ donor. But if someone dies from a brain death related injury, let's say that right now there's a case at the hospital now. Once that person is has been determined that they're brain dead, they're on the ventilator, they're brain dead. Nothing that's not reversible. That's not like being in a coma where you can wake up from a coma. And so from that point, the hospital then notifies, for Georgia, it would be LifeLink. LifeLink is actually then sends out a representative that actually then assesses the patient to see if they're a donor, if they're not, and if they are a donor, if they actually will be able to donate. Because just because you're a registered organ donor does not mean you're gonna 100% be able to be a donor. There's a lot of things that come into play with that, and we can go into that a little bit later too, if you like.
Okay. So tell me, where do we come into the picture with Johnny and Penny? And tell us about that, and y'all give y'all's own, testimony as like your attitudes towards, donation and receiving, and was anything dispelled as well?
No, well, my sister Penny, when she came to me and asked me about being a donor for her, I said yes without a doubt and kept on working. Because I believe in giving a life for a life. Like you just said, my organ can help someone else prolong life, then I'm all for it.
And
So,
I'm sorry. I just want to make something clear so it won't confuse people. In the case of Johnny and Penny, Johnny is a living donor. Penny, his sister, needed a kidney transplant. So in the case of kidneys, you can have a living donor because we can all live with one kidney. So I just wanted to clear that part up so it wouldn't be any confusion as far as you have living donation, an example of like with kidneys, but then you also have, when we register to be organ donors, that's registering giving consent to donate after our death. So that's just to be able to, so there won't be any confusion. Yes.
Did y'all have any, fears with like the surgeries and things of that nature, or?
No, I didn't, because the doctor had explained everything thoroughly to me, that they were going to be laparoscopic, where they do a little small incision, go in and get the kidney, then come out.
Okay.
And I had never been hospitalized since birth, and I had never had any surgery until I had that.
Right then. So you was actually living we can surmise that you were living a healthy life.
Right.
Or the best possible healthy life.
Yeah, because when she told me about it, I had to go to Piedmont, which is what she had done, to get a full examination also. Make sure I was in good health to give her a donor.
I guess in that situation with the kidney being donated to a sibling, is it rare or is it common for it to like be a match? Because don't you have to like match?
Yeah. Individuals, and actually it's actually more uncommon in a lot of cases for people would think that a blood relative would be a perfect match. That's not always the case though. But whether it's a living donor or deceased donor, you do have to have, there is a process. Like you said, there is a match. You have to have the same blood type, tissue type. Depending upon the organ, like if it's a heart transplant, for example, the donor and recipient has to pretty much be about the same height, same build. Because just think about heart. Shaq's heart would be too big for me.
That's something that I don't even think people think about things like that. I'm just thinking that you could just take an organ and, as long as there's a match, But I'm not even. I didn't even think about
Yeah,
it.
in
heart
some
is
cases,
different.
heart is a little
Yeah.
bit different. Now, kidneys is different, but with heart though, you do have to consider the size and build of the person. Because, like I said, Shaquille, my heart would be too small for
Yeah,
Shaq,
right.
and
And
his
vice
would be
versa,
too
yeah.
big for me. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, Penn, did you have any reservations going through the whole process,
Well,
or?
when I first found out, I had high blood pressure that would cause my kidneys to fail. So eventually, I had to do dialysis for like 2.5 years
Oh.
before I could be considered
A
to get
recipient to-
a transplant. Also, I was overweighted, so that
Mhm.
played a part in it. That I had to lose a significant amount of weight
Mhm.
before I could get the transplant.
Mhm.
And I didn't have any other health issues, but so I lost the weight, and finally I got on the transplant list, and they told me if I had a living donor, it would be a faster process. So I asked my brother, and he agreed to go through the physical part to get tested for me to have the transplant.
Was there a backup plan just in case your brother wasn't a good match for you, or?
Well, if he wasn't a good match, I would just had to continue the dialysis treatments until my name came on top of the list to get one matched by someone else.
Oh wow! So you basically just like lucked up then.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was meant to, you know, in that particular instance, because my mother-in-law, she used to work at a dialysis place, actually the one on, was it 2nd Street? And just knowing that people are going in there and you going through that process, I'm like, to me, I'm like, woof. I don't see how some people are able to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's just strenuous.
Oh, yeah,
And you
so-
have people, how often did you have to do that? Was it like once a week or?
You have to do it 3 times a week,
Oof.
like
Yeah.
3 to 4 hours. You're
Just
sitting
sitting
in
there.
a chair, and you know
Exactly.
the needle is going in,
Mhm.
blood is coming out and going into.
And then it's isn't that a very exhausting process in itself? It exerts-
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. It depends on how healthy you are eating. Like you do have to go by a strict diet when you're doing the dialysis. So it just depends on the individual person. Some people go through it and don't have any exhaustion or anything, but some do. So it just depends on the person.
Now, how long has it been since the
Transplant?
transplant happened?
14 years.
Wow.
15.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Since 2004.
Oh wow. So I can imagine that your lifestyle had to change a little bit, and like diet and nutrition and all that.
It has it. When you're on dialysis, you can't eat a certain number of foods, but when you get through with the dialysis, like get a transplant, you can eat pretty much anything you want.
Okay.
And you have more energy. You can exercise as much as you want, and your life span is better. You know, much better than if you're on dialysis.
So I guess what are some common? Well, I guess y'all all can answer this. What would be some common things that people need to avoid so they won't have to go through the situation, or that can be like sort of like a preventative now that y'all have gone through this process, and then you know you represent an organization where you get all this information that people can start doing now?
Well, I can advise people to eat right, watch their salt, sugar, and carb intake to, you know, cut down on the high blood pressure, diabetes. And so if you eat a healthy lifestyle, exercise more, it can be prevented. You can go years, a lifetime without ever being in renal failure, which is kidney failure. So, you know, if you change your lifestyle early on, you can live a healthy life.
Yeah, and to just piggyback on, because unfortunately, in a lot of cases, not just with kidneys, but just overall as far as organ failure, a lot of it is prevented. and that's the sad part of it. And unfortunately, within our community, the African American community, unfortunately, we're prone, just the disparities. We're more at risk for, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, high cholesterol.
It's not really good for you.
So, all of those things contribute to potentially, affecting what's going on the inside. I tell people, it's not all just about looking good on the outside. Yeah, we want to look good on the outside, but if you're not taking care, if you're not doing those preventive things, go and getting your annual checkups. Stop waiting until you're like sick to go to the doctor. The time to go is when you're not sick. Just annually, just get those checkups, those labs. So if there is something, if it's detected early, it could be it's great success as far as treatment. But unfortunately, a lot of times, and like I said, the diabetes and the high blood pressure. And I know several people who have one or the other or both, to be honest with you. I know for some people it is a struggle, trying to keep that high blood pressure under control, trying to manage their diabetes. But it could make a difference between life or death, and we all want to prolong our lives if we can.
So what's y'all's take on why, especially in our community, we function that way?
Well, I believe first and foremost is education. Like Asia said, in our community, there's not enough education out there to educate the people about renal failure and kidney failure.
So we need more programs that can source education and really put it out there.
Yeah, because I don't think we understand necessarily always the possible end results. Because I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, well, my mother had high blood pressure, my daddy had it, the diabetes, one of my family," and so it's just like a regular thing, and not really understanding the true concept of what that means. When I go into the school systems and talk to kids about, high school students about preventive health care, and then also talking to them about, organ donation and what that actually means, most of those kids know of someone, a family member, a parent, a grandparent who goes to dialysis, but they don't know what that means. So it just seems like a regular, normal thing. Mom has to go to dialysis 3 days a week, but you don't know what that means. Like, you don't really know how sick mom or dad or grandmother is. And so we really have to start, educating our kids so they can know these, because like I said, it just becomes a norm. And you don't think anything of it. And so in order to prevent, it passing on from generation to generation, we may be at high risk for certain things, but that's even more reason why we should even take more control of it. And I know,
so really getting to understand our medical history.
Yes. Yes.
I believe we were talking about this on the phone.
We were because a lot of us don't know our medical history. We may not know what it can depend. You could be estranged from one parent or another, and so you may know about one side of your family and not your other. Like I'm one of those people in that situation.
I think a lot of us are.
And then even when we are with our whoever the custodial parents, whoever we grew up with, we still may not have an understanding or knowledge, because also too historically within our communities, we don't share stuff. We keep it, we go to the doctor. If we get that bad diagnosis, we keep it to ourselves.
Okay, so let me interrupt right there.
Okay.
Because these are things that, like, I've been having discussions with people since I've been even doing this show. Why is it that we keep certain stuff like that secret? Like, why? Like, we don't discuss money, we don't discuss sex, and we don't discuss health. Why do you know?
I believe it's fear.
Because I think it's fear.
Because I myself, I just started going to the doctor on a regular basis. I always go to the eye doctor every year. I always go to the dentist. And so when I did go, my blood pressure was up. And I had never in my life had a high blood pressure issue. And so when the doctor told me about it, I told Penny. Because we communicate and conversate daily every other day about each other. But like you said, some people get a bad report from the doctor. They don't tell no one.
Yeah.
And then when at the end, when it's all said and done, don't nobody know about you. About why you got this or why you got that. And so my advice, let somebody know, because somebody need to know.
Yeah, I definitely think we need to dispel that, because I talk to my kids all the time, my wife, everything, and I'm like, we shouldn't hide stuff from one another.
That's right.
But then also I can see why sometimes we do, because when you do put information out there, especially to your family, now you're vulnerable, and they might misuse that information.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and we don't want that situation to happen. But I definitely think it should be talked about more and promoted more in education and even in the school systems and outside of school as well.
Yeah, and I think some of it is also denial. When people get that bad medical report, you know, you're in denial. You don't believe it. You don't want to believe the doctors, and you know, we and I'm a strong believer of prayer, but we gotta do more than just pray about it. You know, we gotta put action to it. Right. So we just and I think it's just, and I think also too, we're also trying to protect our loved ones when we're keeping those secrets. We don't want them to worry. We don't want them to, you know, to be afraid. So we keep it to ourselves. But the problem is though, we don't take action and we don't do anything. And then so then when suddenly, sometimes when it seems, and I've seen it and heard it, oh, he just died suddenly, like out of the blue. He's never been sick. Well, yeah, he actually probably was sick. We just didn't know it. Yeah.
Because I don't see people just falling off like that, especially if you're healthy.
Yes.
Right. So from the community standpoint, what can they do more to get involved, or, you know, as far as becoming a donor, just even supporting the organization, or just trying to access that information?
Okay. Well, the first step, as far as, and this falls on my responsibility and the responsibility of LifeLink, is we being out in the community and first making people aware, because that's where the first thing comes from, awareness. You know, I have so many people tell me, you know, they're not a registered organ donor, and it's not because they believe in any myths or they're fearful. They just didn't know, like, you know, what it meant. Like, I don't know what that means. So I said no, which if you don't understand something, you should definitely say no. And because it's not something that is, at least in Georgia, that's taught in the school system. So, you know, you're 16 years old, you're going to get your license unless you have a parent that knows to tell you to say yes or educate you on what it is. You don't know.
Exactly.
So the first thing is bringing awareness and, you know, doing, you know, connecting with people such as you, and we want to thank you very much for allowing us to come on, because people like you and others in the media in the community that allow us to be able to come and speak and share. That's how we're getting the education and awareness out.
Yeah.
So
well, you know, I definitely love that's my whole purpose behind doing stuff like this. When I started with artists, because I help a lot of independent. I'm a huge advocate for independent artists. But then, as I started doing that, started meeting more and different people, and I'm like, you know, all these different topics that no one's talking about should be talked about, or at least expressed and put out there, so it can stimulate conversation within the community. So I was like, why not use my own platform to be able to do that? So I'm like, I'm always gonna want things like this, you know, because I thought it's fascinating to learn about it, and the fact what you said that statistically, I'm like, you said there's 5,000 residents in the state of Georgia, and over 60% of them, I'm like, that's over 3,000 people that fit in our community that need it, who can't get access to it. And then like, what happens when, you know, it's something that's real serious?
Yeah, because you know, out of that 5,000 plus that's on the waiting list, you know, and that's just those on the waiting list. So just imagine the number that's not on the waiting list, who's sick, who's on dialysis, who everybody. There's a process, and Penny could, you know, tell you that process, as far as you don't just get on the waiting list because you need a kidney or because you need a heart or a liver. You know, there's a process that individuals have to go through in order to get on that waiting list. So, you know, if everyone that needed a life-saving organ transplant was actually on the waiting list, it would probably be triple that. But, you know, like I said, as far as, unfortunately, you know, 5,000 on the waiting list. Last year in 2018 in Georgia, there were 300 transplants done in the whole state. And that's across all, you know, all ethnicities, all races, which actually was like the highest number of actually deceased donors that we've had in the state. And that number may seem low when you're thinking, well, 5,000 in need, but it was, you know, just 3,000. But there's so many things that it's certain factors that determine how you can be an organ donor. Just because you're a registered organ donor doesn't mean you're automatically going to be a donor after you pass away. Only 1 to 2% of registered organ donors actually end up being able to donate after death.
So what do you need to do to like increase that number?
Well, but it's really nothing an individual can do, because in order to be an organ donor, you have to die from a brain death related injury or illness. I sort of tapped on that earlier. But when I say brain death related injury or illness, you're talking about, of course, anything that causes trauma to the brain. That so of course, like a car accident could cause that. An aneurysm, a stroke, a drowning, because that stops oxygen from flowing through the brain, which then causes, and unfortunately in some other cases you have, suicides, anything that, a gunshot wound to the head, anything, someone falling out of a tree, anything that causes trauma to the head, or causes brain death, causes oxygen to stop flowing through the brain, which then leads to brain death. That's the only way you can be an organ donor. Wow. So you have that automatically rules out a lot of people.
It's like a law, I guess.
Well, and the reason is because when you think about when someone passes away, when the heart stops and the lungs stop, once the organs start shutting down, they start shutting down, immediately, which means they're not they're not viable for transplantation.
Gotcha.
So when you die from a brain death related injury or illness, and let me add on, I left off a major part, in a hospital setting on a ventilator. The ventilator is what's keeping the heart pumping, which is keeping the other organs viable for the possibility of transplantation. So, if that makes sense. So, in order to be an organ donor, you have to die from a brain death related injury or illness in a hospital setting on a ventilator.
Wow.
Now, you could possibly be a tissue donor or a cornea donor, but not an organ donor if you just died from just regular natural causes. But in order to be an organ donor, it has to be from a brain death related injury or illness in a hospital on a ventilator.
So, to me, then, the only other option as far as really helping out, besides the prevention side, is living donor.
Well, that only helps as far as an option for kidneys.
Kidneys.
The way how we can all help out, because at the end of the day, we all know, I don't care how healthy we are, we're all gonna die. I don't know when. Lord, I hope it's give me some more years though,
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't know.
Yeah.
So what we can do, those of us who are, of age of consent, 17 or older to consent, what we can do is register to be organ donors, because we don't know if we're gonna be in that 1 to 2% or not. We don't control that part of it. The part we can control is registering to be a donor, and which simply says, I give consent that if I die in a manner that allows me to be able to donate, I give consent to do so.
Exactly.
So that's really all we can control as far as on that part.
Yeah.
Everything after we register, everything after that is really beyond any of our control.
Yeah.
So.
And then I guess the other piece of that is so people won't be in the situations to do more preventative.
Yeah,
Work.
because that's the other way we're going to decrease the list is to stop adding to it.
Yeah.
And by stop adding to it, like the points Penny brought up earlier, just simple modifications, no one's saying you have to just totally eliminate, sweets and carbs, just everything in moderation.
Exactly.
And go to your preventive checkups. And if there is something, if you do have to take medication for blood pressure or whatever, take the medication as prescribed.
Yeah.
The goal is to not have to get on the medication, but if you have to, take it and take it, as prescribed.
Yeah, I'm like, you can work your way off of medication.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. You can. It can be reversed. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else y'all would like to add, or any last words, to encourage people, whether it be preventative or if they're going through the situation, to what to expect and how to really overcome?
Well, if they're not a donor, consider being a donor.
Okay.
Because you're giving an organ for a life, and you can do that by, like she said, registering with LifeLink of Georgia, or when you get your driver's license renewed.
Anything you want to add?
I would just like to let people know, just to get educated on it, get more information on stuff, and ask questions.
Okay. Any last words?
Well, yes, and if anyone is not registered and you want to either read up more and educate yourself more about organ donation, you can go to www.donatelifegeorgia.org. lifelink.org. Or you can contact me directly at 478-957-3861. I do go out into the community and do various community events. We in Lifelink, our services, there's no fee for me to come out and do a workshop or a presentation, or have a table with information. We don't charge for any of that. So, I could definitely be contacted, once again, 478-957-3861 or www.donatelifegeorgia.org.
Okay, and are people allowed to, send donations to Lifelink, or
as far as monetary, we don't take
monetary, or I guess maybe they want to donate time to help with events and things like that.
Oh, okay. We do have a volunteer program. That's how actually Penny and Johnny are Lifelink volunteers. So they can get that. Go through to the website or contact me as well. And if they're interested in volunteering, a lot of our volunteers are either transplant recipients or living donors like Johnny, or donor family members. We have individuals who loved ones passed away, and they choose to they want to volunteer as well to share the message of organ donation, and they can definitely really do it from a personal standpoint of losing a loved one who was actually a donor. So yes, through the website or by calling me directly, I can link them to as far as our volunteer program.
Okay, well, I appreciate the story, your time.
Yes, thank
appreciate
you.
Your expertise.
Thank you.
So anybody out there, y'all want to Lifelink Georgia?
Lifelink of Georgia.
Lifelinkofgeorgia.com or no .org.
It's lifelinkfoundation.org. Yeah.
Y'all make sure y'all go out there, look it up. If you want to volunteer, do that as well, and consider being a donor. All right.